The Church cares, and so does the St. Raymond Anonymous Foundation for Freedom, Family, and Faith. Hi, I'm Ann DeSantis, Executive Director. In 2015, the Mercedarian Friars came together because they wanted to start a foundation to help families in crisis. And that's exactly what we've been doing over these years. Whether it be something to do with divorce, separation, trauma, job loss, loss of a loved one, or other adversities, we've helped so many families get through those tough times through the spiritual works of mercy. We'd love to hear from you. Please do get in touch with us for our services. They are prayer, priestly consultation, podcasts and videos, and programs and events. We look forward to hearing from you. Just go to nonotus.org and get in touch with me. I look forward to hearing from you. God bless.
Fiat Ministry Network and Patchwork Heart Ministry present Journeys in Faith. Now, here's Ann DeSantis.
Good evening. Welcome to Journeys in Faith here on Fiat Ministry Network. This is Ann DeSantis. This is a special summer edition of the show. I'm so glad to be back here with all of you here because I have two amazing guests. They're friends of mine too. They're the host of the Pints and Pews podcast. I have Robert LeBlanc and Dennis Kivlahan. Thank you both so much for joining me on this show. I hope I pronounced your last name correctly, Dennis.
Just a little bit of a change there. And yeah, it's Kivlahan, but close.
Kivlahan.
Yep. Kivlahan.
Yes,
Yep.
thank you. There we go.
So, usually it's my name that's the people have problems pronouncing because the French spelling. My whole life it's been Robert. It's like
Yep.
Robert.
It's Robert.
Dennis made that mistake once.
I made it the
never
first time
again.
and he corrected me. But it's great to be on your show. And you did say amazing guest. So she's talking about myself and yourself, Robert, just in case we were wondering who she was.
I was wondering who else was coming on the show.
Yeah, exactly.
No, thank you so much.
Looked over
Ann.
my shoulder here.
Yes.
Thanks, Ann. Great to be on the show.
Oh, thank you. Now, I love your tagline, which I'm just going to read right here, is that our two guys talking about the Catholic faith over a couple pints of their favorite craft beers. Now, I was a guest on the show a few months back, and admittedly, I was drinking a glass of wine instead of
We'll bend
beer.
the rules a little bit.
We
for
bend the
friends.
rules for a few people. Yeah.
Well, thank you both again. I thought we could just start out with a little bit about both of you. You are both teachers, and you're in the Toronto area. Why don't we start out with you, Robert, just a little bit about yourself and your family, and then love to hear how you both came together for the Pints and Pews podcast.
Yeah, so born and raised here in the Toronto area. Like I said, it was a bit of a bane of my existence growing up in an Anglophone area with a Francophone name. I always say I was in the French quarter of Newmarket was probably my house and the next door neighbors, and that was it. And I grew up as a cradle Catholic, Catholic schools, elementary school, high school, but it really wasn't until later in life that really came to the fullness of the Catholic faith and the deep appreciation for the faith. And it's been a wonderful journey ever since.
Yes, I've seen part of that journey too, just getting to know you as we became acquainted during the pandemic. More of these like online conferences and a lot of podcasting was going on. And of course, I'm grateful that we became acquainted and you've actually done some podcasting too for the foundation I represent. I'm so grateful for that too.
It's truly been a blessing, and making your friendship has been a blessing. And like you say, doing the work, doing the Lord's work and getting out in the vineyard, as much as it's a struggle, sometimes truly is a blessing for all of us. And I think Dennis would concur on that as well.
Yes, absolutely. Dennis, let's hear about you and your family, your work.
Absolutely, Robert. I would definitely concur. First of all, thanks for having us all the way from Philadelphia. I think this is my first podcast south of the border. We did one out in Edmonton, which is a lot further away from than Philadelphia, but this is the first one south of the border. And my journey is a little bit different from Robert's. Certainly grew up in an large Irish Catholic family, which speaks to a lot of your American listeners for sure. I was the youngest of 8. My mother and father were both Irish immigrants to the country, so they came out in the 1950s. My mother actually was a widow with 6 children, and then she married my father and then had myself and my next eldest brother. So there was 8 in total. My father just passed away this year, so both my parents have now, unfortunately, they're both gone, but we continue to pray for them. But I grew up in not an overly devout family, but certainly the case was Sunday Mass was just the norm. There wasn't anything that you did, you could do many things on Sunday, but it started with Mass every Sunday morning. And like Robert, certainly, in my late teens and university years, fell a little bit away from the faith. But certainly once I got into the teaching at a Catholic institution like Robert, certainly befriended some Catholic teachers as well later on, Robert. My faith journey is certainly starting to take hold a little bit better. And certainly we're going to talk about that when we do talk about the podcast that myself and Robert started a couple of years ago. But it's one that basically Mass, confession, those things were always a part of my life. But it's just listening to certain podcasts in the last couple of years, developing more of a prayerful life, that I've certainly started to explore my faith a little bit more recently.
Yeah, wonderful to hear that. And also the way that you came together, because I do know a little bit about that because I was on your podcast too. And you are both teachers as well and very well acquainted. I love that story about how the idea came about. I wondered if one of you could tell that story. Maybe Robert, we'll go back to you.
I think Robert probably tell it best in that respect.
Robert will tell it best. Robert's scrambling to try to remember. I'm so used to doing these with a beer in hand, and I see Dennis taking a quick drink there. And we both said that we were just going to have water today, and just kind of so out of the ordinary not to have a beer on the go. So where did the podcast come from? Sorry, excuse me. Like Dennis said, through working in Catholic schools, because we are blessed up here in Ontario to have publicly funded Catholic education, we got to meet a number of Catholic gentlemen as well that were in the teaching profession. And we would get together about once a month, give or take, Dennis.
Maybe once every couple of weeks, yeah.
At a local pub, and over a pint or two of our favorite beers, we would just be having a chat amongst Catholic gentlemen. And over the years, and as the pandemic hit, I did have a side ministry, catholicmoment.ca, and I was doing some YouTube videos. And as we were making our way through the COVID lockdowns, I said to Dennis, we're usually having a beer and talking about the faith. Why don't we just hit record on some of those conversations and see where it goes? Is really that faith and fellowship aspect. And it's, we're having those conversations all the time. We both work in the same school. So on our breaks, whether it's at lunch or before school, after school, a lot of times we are chatting things of the faith. So why not share those conversations?
I think you mentioned that one time, and we were just at lunch, normally just regularly talking about the faith. And he said, we should really record this. And I didn't give it much thought. I thought, okay. And then he kind of mentioned, a couple of months later, what do you think about a podcast?
And
I thought podcast, I've never listened to a podcast before. I don't even know how that works. And he just said, well, let's, I'll do all the legwork, which he continues to do. And you just follow along, and we'll see how it goes. And I guess a couple of years later, here we are, still going strong.
I was going to ask you, Dennis, do you still know how those work? How to put it together?
I leave that to the brains of the trust, the organization.
And so when I approached Dennis about this, and I said, we're going to have a beer and we're going to talk about the faith, we got to come up with a name. We need a name for this. And really liking that notion of alliteration. We said at one point, we said, Bibles and beers, but we're going to talk more than just scripture. And we hit on the
It's
pints.
a bit longer at first, wasn't it, Robert, our name? And then we shortened
Well,
it to,
at one point we were going to go with G.K. Chesterton. In Catholicism, the pint, the pipe, and the cross can all fit together,
yeah, that was a
which
little
is generally Dennis's line at the end of the show.
right.
Um, and yeah, it was a little bit longer. So we were going to then go with pints in the pews.
Right.
And I can't remember, Dennis, was it your wife or my wife that said that's condoning drinking in church?
I think it
Oh.
was your wife that mentioned that. Yeah, we don't want to have pints in the pews because we don't usually have pints in the pew, or we don't ever have pints in the pews. But yeah, then we got just pints and pews, and it fit much better on the baseball cap, as you know, Anne.
I have to show this, which
Oh,
I know
of
it's
course.
looking backwards here because
it's-
of the
looking
Zoom.
good.
Okay,
Looks
but there
really
it
good,
is,
yeah.
my own cap, and I'm
Well, we'll
proud to
all
be
put
part of the
them-
family.
We'll all put them on. There we go. Mine's a little too, my head's a little too swollen for the baseball hat, but
yeah, just because of the summer heat and being inside, I don't know if I'll put mine on, but I want to be glad
No.
to show you and that I do wear that a lot when I'm outside walking and things like that. So
Thank you.
thank
Excellent,
you.
Anne.
And
we're going to have to get some Journeys in Faith swagwear to wear around as well.
hey, yeah, that's a great idea. I should do that. I do have a mug, so keep an eye. Maybe we will think about doing that, doing
Excellent.
baseball caps or something. But
Yeah.
I love that idea. Now we're going to be having to take a break real soon. But before we do that, I just wondered if you could share with us what has it been like over these past 2 years, because you've interviewed just so many great guests. Dennis, maybe we'll start with you.
You know what? Thanks, Anne. And I would say it's been an absolute blessing. Now, Robert has been doing, he's written a couple of books and he's been doing a lot of workshops. So he's been quite busy, and his faith has been developing as a result of that. I found these last 2 years of the podcast, just speaking with Robert and the excellent guests for the most part that he has lined up, has been a great spiritual development for myself. It's incredible, yourself included in that list, Anne, that these people have come on to this show, and I've been absolutely inspired by them. It really has. I can't believe in these just, 30 or 40 broadcasts that we've done, the amount of not only information, but the amount of the depth of the faith of these people. And for me not to be inspired, it's impossible. It's been really, really, truly a blessing. And I'm sure Robert would concur with that.
I have to share, and that the episode you were on with us, which was this past April, has gotten some really fantastic feedback, and people were really moved by your story and by your work with the foundation and your book, Love and Care for the Marginalized. So it really did move people. And I would have to agree with Dennis. Listening to our guests and getting to know our guests and hearing their stories and what they're doing for the faith has been absolutely amazing. And it really bolsters our own faith. A lot of times we're doing these through the school year, so it's during the work week. So we've put in a full day and we've come home and done what we need to do at home as husbands and fathers. And so we're not starting to record until closer to 9 o'clock at night. And I mean, numerous times as Dennis and I have been preparing to record the episode before the guest has arrived, we've been like, man, we're exhausted. We're tired. Why are we doing this? I really don't have anything to put into it right now. And then we'll do the interview with the guest and we are revitalized, regenerated. And we go, wow, that was just so amazing. And what the guests bring to the show and what they bring to our own lives, we hope it's conveyed through the podcast to others to reinvigorate their own faith journeys.
I think it is. And I also think your knowledge of catechesis, you're both catechists, so it's something that's really integrated in, that you're not only are you having fun talking about your faith, but your knowledge of faith also comes through on the podcast. And we do have a lot more to talk about in that respect. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back here on Journeys in Faith in a few minutes. Welcome back to Journeys in Faith here on Fiat Ministry Network. I'm joined by Dennis Kivlahan and Robert LeBlanc with the Pints and Pews podcast. And on the first half of this show, they were talking about their faith journeys. They were talking about the podcast itself and how it came to be. And so I thought maybe we could spend a little bit of time actually talking about some of the guests that you have had on the show, because people who are watching this podcast right now, our show, Journeys in Faith, they might be interested in checking it out. And I'd like to give them that call to action to go to catholicmoment.ca or just simply to Google the Pints and Pews podcast, because you can find that in so many places in the podcasting world. So why don't we just start out with you, Robert? Tell us about some of those guests, the highlights of some of what you've done over the past couple of years.
I think each and every guest is a highlight in and of themselves. Dennis and I think we were about 5 or 6 episodes in when we finally got up the courage to say, let's have a guest on. Let's invite another voice into the conversation. And again, because it was new territory for us and we really weren't sure how it was going to pan out and how it was going to work, we actually called on a good friend, Father Matt McCarthy, who is the vocations director here in the Archdiocese of Toronto. And Father Matt had actually been a part of that group of Catholic gentlemen that would get together on a monthly basis and chat about the faith over a pint. So it really was like old times when we had him on the show. And that was a great introduction for us to get into interviewing others. And then from there, we've interviewed a number of other different podcasters out there, because there's so much fantastic Catholic content out there. So from there, we interviewed a friend of ours, who's now a friend of ours, the Catholic Canuck, David Scubin out of Edmonton, Alberta. And again, because I'd done a few podcasts with him, it just made it that much easier. And then kind of a bit of a health crisis struck the Pints and Pews podcast shortly after that interview. And Dennis went down for a couple months and he couldn't join us. So I really did have to fly solo a little bit. And I'm just, through my mind now, trying to run the gamut of the different guests that we've had.
Well, I think they were your highest ratings when you had done that stretch by yourself, Robert, from August to December of last year. But
so maybe I should take a little bit of a break, and we'll see who has better ratings on their own, yourself or myself.
I think you had that Chesterton expert, did you not?
The Fulton Sheen, yeah.
Fulton Sheen, excuse me, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, Al Smith. I like to call him the Sheen Machine. Yeah, so you would know Al. Yeah, you've done some
great
work with
in fact, he's a good friend of Fiat Ministry Network, has been on the shows on the network several times, and actually had his own show for quite a while. I don't know what's going on with that right now, but he is very close with our network.
Yeah, I think just another very busy gentleman from what I see through his social media. He's been at a number of conferences of late. And again, fantastic story there as well. And
the Cordial
guest
Catholic
has the Cordial Catholic,
yep.
Who, as we were about 10, 15 minutes into the episode, I always smile when I listen back to it. You can pinpoint the moment where we realized we were both from the same hometown. All right.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And he does fantastic work as well. Great story. He was a non-denominational evangelical who converted to the Catholic faith. And from that, he's got a weekly podcast and fantastic work that he does there. Another one of our friends, and we had Dominic D'Souza on from Smart Catholics.
Good friend of mine.
And again, the story, and as he was talking about working in the graphic design business, and he was doing cutouts of Christ for an advertisement, and having a vision and a moment with Christ while he was working with that really brought him into the faith. And I would have to say, Dennis, I think for me, that's always been the big highlight, is listening to their faith journey and what they have to share for that. I don't know.
Yeah, and it doesn't really matter if they're a lay person or religious or priest. I mean, we've had a couple of priests who were of little faith or no faith, and they both we were amazed by their stories, Father
Mhm.
Greg, and most recently my parish priest, Father Chris, and no faith at all. And there's great priests now. So I think it just speaks to each one of our journeys and how, for some of us it comes early, for some of us it might come a little bit later, but we're all going on that journey, and we're continuing that journey every day of our lives, right?
Mm. Well, thanks for bringing up journey, since that's the topic of this show. Exactly. I think you both have done a great job talking about, what you've done with this podcast and also your faith life too. I wondered if we could also talk a bit about your teaching and any tips that you might want to give for people watching, parents who want to catechize better their children and their families. I don't know if you had any words of advice, even some simple things that would help to draw them closer as a family and closer into their prayer life. Maybe we'll start with you, Dennis. I didn't know if you had any
Yeah,
tips
I
that you want to
think
share.
I certainly, and I was lucky enough to teach history and civics for many years until I'm now teaching religion full time. But what I think worked best in the classroom, and I don't know if Robert will concur, is certainly, we're going to talk about the Catholic faith, that's it. But I can't, especially senior students, we're talking, grade 12, 17. We certainly, you can't get too preachy with them. So I find it best if you just try to live that model, be that model for that person. And I've noticed that since I've gone full time into the teaching religion, is that I have to be careful with my words. And I certainly want to live a life that, would be Christ-like. And that's the one thing I try to do the most. And often I fail, of course, because I'm human. But and I think, parents just living that life for your kids, living that model. How do you love your kids the most? I once heard someone say, and love their mother. And that's what I try to do in my own relationship with their mom, with my wife. So I think that works best for me, just trying to be that model, often failing, but certainly working on it every day. Robert?
I think I'm leading the competition in failure on that, but that's
Both of us have work, I think, a little bit.
yeah, 100%. I think the kids, whether they're your own children or the students in the classroom, know whether you are authentic in the faith or not. So it's one thing to talk the faith and to be teaching the faith, but like Dennis said, if you're not living the faith and living it authentically, the kids pick up on that. And if you're not doing that and they see you being hypocritical, nothing's going to push them away from the faith faster than this, right? Now, on top of that, you're asking, Anya, what would be some tips for parents or for other catechesis teachers? Know the faith. You need to know the faith before you can teach the faith, right? Know the foundation so that you can live out that model of life. But the kids are going to ask the questions. And I've taught everything from grade 1 through grade 12. And all the way through, what I've noticed is that the kids have this thirst to know the truth. And they want to know the truth. And they want to know the teachings of the Catholic Church. And they're going to ask questions. And they're going to ask very difficult questions. So you need to be ready to answer them. But that being said, if you don't have the answer, don't make it up either. No, I don't know this. I don't understand. I'm not sure what the church teaches on this, or I'm not sure what scripture says on this. Let's look into it together and let's figure it out together.
And always done with charity in mind as you're taking them on that journey, for sure.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And I know I can be guilty at times of not being as charitable as I should be. And like Dennis said, we all stumble, we all fail, but that helps us to walk the walk better afterwards.
I love what you both said, the authenticity. It's so funny that you use that word, Dennis, because, and I think you both actually use that word, is that kids do pick up on that, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
And they don't want anything that's fake. They don't want anything to do with something that's not real. And they see through it, I think, pretty easily too. So that was very intelligent of you both, because I completely agree with that statement. And I think the way that we live our faith and really love our faith, really, isn't that the best way that we can evangelize? is to not be too mechanical about it, right? Making it something very natural that we're living every single day of our lives. And so I just commend you both for your work, because you're really out there, living it day to day in your vocation as teachers and catechists. And so I'm just very grateful to people like you for your hard work every single day of the year. I mean, now we're in the summer, right? So you get a little bit of relaxation
bit of a
until
break.
school
I think we're
starts up
just-
again.
And I think we're just planting a few seeds along the way, and hopefully they take hold. We pray that they take hold.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest struggle. Like Dennis says, we're planting the seeds, but we don't always see the flowers blossom.
Right.
And that's
Exactly.
very, very difficult. And it is a struggle. It is difficult. So I would say to people, and especially with parents, stick with it, persevere, pray. And as your children hit those teenage years and those questioning years, and they do fall away from the faith, like Dennis alluded to earlier, both of us, we can go back to our high school and university days, and there's not some very proud moments in there. But continue to pray for your children. I always say the faith is a lot like, I say garlic, or you could say tulip bulbs. You plant them in the fall and they lie dormant through the dark days of the winter, but they will eventually bloom and grow.
And I think you mentioned as well, Anne, in a lot of your talks, and to accompany them along the way. That's what you have to do. Be an ear for them, right? Don't always talk over them, but certainly, listen to them, right? And with that, with everybody we come in contact with, be the ear for that person, hopefully.
Amen. Because everyone has a bit of wisdom, don't they? I mean, no matter where they are,
100%.
There's wisdom to be found in the youngest of people and the oldest of people, and all of those in between times of
And
our
sometimes the
lives,
most
right?
unlikely of people as well. You're right.
Yes. Amen. Amen. Now, as we're coming, not in a little while, not right away, but to the close of the podcast, I wondered if you could tell us what's going on for you this coming year, if there's any call to action or something that you wanted our audience to know about your podcast or about your ministries. Love to know.
Well, that's
Start
the
out with
expert,
you, Robert,
Robert.
maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Survival. Survival. Here we are. We're approaching the end of July, and the back to school dreams have already started. So with the podcast, we've got a few guests lined up for the near future. I always drive Dennis insane because I would have guests lined up for the next 3 years. And Dennis is like, yeah, let's just roll out of bed and see who we can get.
Let's go down a couple of days. We'll see who we'll get.
So, but we do have some great guests lined up. One gentleman, Deacon Pedro, who's actually very busy at this moment this week because he is on the council for the Holy Father's visit to Canada. So as we're recording this, the Holy Father is here in Canada. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from Deacon Pedro what that experience was all about. All right, and he has the Catholic Hour, or the Salt and Light Hour on Catholic Radio. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from him. I know Dennis has a guest lined up for us from Charlie from
Min,
the business world,
who's going to talk about finances and Catholicism. So I think that's something that our listeners might be interested in. And Robert and I keep talking about, a road trip, Trappist monasteries that brew beer in Europe. So that's going to come down. That's probably a couple of years away yet, Robert, but
that's a retirement project.
But we want to do something with beer and in visiting some beautiful places in Europe.
Hey, it sounds like you might want to think about a pilgrimage. I'm just saying.
I think that's on the back burner
for the Pints and Pews podcast. You could do that.
It's in the back of our minds. It's just going to be finding the 5 minutes to get that organized and together. But no, pilgrimage is definitely on the table.
Definitely,
I might be
going to happen.
There we go.
My husband and I, we
Absolutely.
can. Maybe this isn't the time to talk about it, but after the podcast, right? So would you both have some final words before we end? Start out with you, Dennis.
First of all, Anne, I want to thank you so much for having us on. But I think, I don't know what, I was listening to a few episodes of, various podcasts, yourself included. And I like the fact that, you mentioned something about working within our own domestic life and a family and our friends, and staying to the lane that you're driving in. I think we all want to change the world, and we think that our podcast from somehow is going to have a major effect on the world. Really, it's going to have maybe a few friends and family members listening to, and they might change. And then, as you talked about with Bill, that ripple effect. And hopefully they'll go out and change a few people. And that's it. And I don't have any, preconceived notions. I'm really enjoying my podcasting hosting duties with Robert. I hope it continues, but I have to work on my spiritual life as well. And that's a journey too. So I think and we're never too late. I'm in my 50s now. So I think if one of your listeners is thinking, oh, you know what, I've wasted the last 50 years. And absolutely, it's never too late to start on that journey. Start with a little bit of a prayerful life. Make sure Sunday Mass is in your, weekly schedule, and then everything can just go from there.
Such wisdom. Thank you so much, Dennis. And you, Robert?
The same. No, I like you say, such great wisdom, like to follow that up. I would say, persevere in the faith as we go through those moments of spiritual dryness. Is continue to pray, continue to persevere in the faith, continue to grow in the faith as well. Listening to podcasts, watching the YouTube videos, reading books, but continue to grow in the faith. Never let it sit still. Go to the saints, go to Mary, listen to their words of wisdom. Father Chris, who we were just recording with yesterday, a great pearl of wisdom right at the very end of the recording, where Dennis asked about that, as far as working through spiritual dryness. And he said, always be trying something new in the faith. Try a new devotional, turn to a new saint. And I think that's really where we need to be. We need to be constantly growing in our faith, because if we're not growing in our faith, we're stagnating.
I love that advice. I mean, especially finding a new saint or something like that, or a new devotion, because I think we can get somewhat bored with doing the same thing, can't we? So
For
it's
sure.
been
Definitely.
such a pleasure to have you both on this podcast. I'd love to have you back again on Journeys in Faith. Thank you both, Robert and Dennis. And for all of you, we'll see you next time. Now, I do have to make a note here that this is the summer edition of Journeys in Faith. We'll be back in the fall. God bless everyone. We'll see you in the fall of 2022.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you, Anne. God bless.
God bless.
Journeys of Faith is a production of Fiat Ministry Network and Patchwork Heart Ministry. For more information about Journeys of Faith, email info@fiatministrynetwork.tv. And be sure to friend, follow, and like us on social media. Just search Journeys in Faith with Ann DeSantis.